Welcome to the MLB Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11, taking a look at tonight's 13-game MLB slate, breaking down some offense, where to find it, what places to avoid. We got Coors on our hands. We got the Pirates heading into Colorado, so obviously those big bats are priced up on tonight's slate. We had a couple pitching changes to note, so lots to touch on. Starting with the first game here, we're looking at White Sox and Blue Jays, over-under of 8.5. Toronto big favorites there. Expecting a lot of that offense to come from the Toronto side. They got a near 5-run total. Miguel Gonzalez, home run prone at times overall. Struggles with left-handed bats, which Toronto doesn't have a ton of, but since 2014, he's allowed a 348 WOBA with a 1.51 home runs per 9. Righties, 327 WOBA, 1.39 home runs per 9. So you're looking top to bottom here of plenty of homers. Ezequiel Carrera is the guy, a cheap guy leading off, hitting from that left side, being in front of Donaldson, Bautista, Encarnacion, and Tulo. Interesting for a cheap play there. But obviously those names that I mentioned are the big ones that you want to look at. Justin Smoke, if you wanted to get a little bit different in GPPs, he's hitting from that left side. But overall, with Miguel Gonzalez struggling to keep the ball in the yard, and at Rogers Center, you're expecting Toronto to put up a ton of runs tonight, and you're looking for a pretty big power stack from them. On the other side of things, the White Sox, not really looking at them as any real threat to Marcus Stroman. They got a 3.5 run total there, so I'm not really targeting them on offense. Next game here, we got Oakland and Detroit. There is some rain in the area, so it's something to keep an eye on as the day goes on. I'm not picking on really either of these guys. I think this game's going to be pretty low scoring. Of course, you can still look at the Tigers bats because their prices have come down. Kendall Graveman's pitched pretty well this year. Comerica, not the greatest spot, in late April. It's not a friendly park when it's in colder weathers. But overall, guys like Justin Upton, Miguel Cabrera, Victor Martinez, J.D. Martinez, always in play. Kinsler as well. Overall, the way Zimmerman's pitching, I don't expect this A's offense to put up much. Talked about Zimmerman on the pitcher pod possibly being an option tonight. So really looking at more so the Tiger side, if anything. Next one here, you got Red Sox and Braves, Rick Porcello, Julio Teheran, over-under of 8. And really, this is another game where I'm not looking at the Braves side, overall 3.9 Vegas total there. If anything, you could possibly look at Freddie Freeman, 3,700 there on DraftKings, so not a bad price tag for him. FanDuel's not too bad either. He's kind of a play that you might look at as far as if you're paying up for those big bats, because 2,900's certainly in play. And Coors doesn't really offer a first baseman outside of John Jaso, who's priced up. So you can look at him in cash games as well as GPPs. Obviously, Porcello hasn't been strong against left-handed bats since 2014, allowing a 328 WOBA. But overall, I think Porcello is actually in a decent spot here, so I think Freeman's really the only exposure I'm looking at. As far as the other side of things go, well, you're looking at the Red Sox losing the DH, so interesting to see if Ortiz or Hanley plays first base. If Ortiz is in the lineup, you like him against Teheran, so who struggles against left-handers. And really you like any lefty that's in this spot because he's allowed a 346 WOBA to lefties since 2014 with a 1.44 home runs per 9. If you wanted to get a little bit different, you could take a look at some of the bottom order guys there like Brock Holt, Jackie Bradley for cheap. Certainly interesting plays, but obviously the lineup spot is pretty unfavorable. Next game here, you have Reds and Mets with an over-under of 6.5. Mets big favorites. I am not picking on Syndergaard. Love him tonight against this Reds team at home. But the Mets side of things, they are definitely interesting just because Iglesias has shown a little bit of struggles going up against lefties. 330 WOBA, his K percentage is a little bit lower than what he usually throws, especially against righties. Ground ball rate's pretty average. So you can really look at this Mets team if you want to get different tonight because the total is so low for them. But guys like Granderson, Conforto, Duda, Walker really catch my eye. David Wright, not really. Travis Arnaud is not really a guy I'm looking at. So I think you're really sticking with the lefties in this Mets team, and they're definitely GPP only for me. But out there at Citi Field, if any runs are coming, it's going to be from that New York side. Next game, Orioles and Rays, Kevin Gausman versus Chris Archer, over-under of 7.5. Tropicana kind of limits a lot of the damage here. Not really looking at a lot of guys from this game either, especially with that Rays offense not being too great. I know Gossman's coming back off the DL. You can look at them in GPPs, especially at Dickerson's price tag still. But overall, Gossman, I mean, has been fairly tough on right hand or on lefties. And doesn't allow a ton of home runs. That is something, and the game's in drop. So overall, I think this offense is pretty limited. Chris Davis is a guy who's always worthy of GPPs. Same with Manny Machado, just because Chris Archer has not looked right so far this year. But obviously, Davis and his K potential kind of puts him out of the map in cash games. Machado's still safe, but there are better third basemen that you can target tonight. 8 o'clock, this is another big offensive game. I'm looking at Yankees and Rangers. Both pitchers are bound to get hit hard tonight, especially by left-handers. You're looking at Eovaldi's out of 342 WOBA since 2014 to right-handed bats, or to left-handed bats, sorry, 33% hard ball rate. So that really puts a lot of guys in play. You like Fielder and GPPs, so you can put Mitch Moreland there. Odor hitting down the lineup, but still a solid play. Nomar Mazara is a guy who I'm keeping on my radar tonight. Going to be a lock for me in cash and GPP games just because he's offers some discount. Hitting second in that lineup against Eovaldi in that ballpark is going to be pretty favorable for him. On the other side, Cesar Ramos, lefty. You can look at some bats here like Alex Rodriguez, who's pretty cheap. Carlos Beltran as well, Mark Teixeira from the right side, those switch hitters. Starlin Castro is a guy I'm going to keep my eye on to see if he slides up in the order. He would become an interesting value play at second base. Outside of that, I'm not really looking at too many lefties like Ellsbury and Gardner, even though Ramos is on the hill. But one thing to keep an eye on is the bullpen. If he only goes 4 innings, guys like Ellsbury, Gardner might see a right-handed reliever for really the second half of the game. So it is something to consider when you're putting together maybe a Yankees stack tonight. This game is very high scoring at 9.5, and it's looking pretty even. Both teams have a near 5-run total. So really looking at them to do some damage on both sides. Next one here, you got Indians and Twins. Danny Salazar, time alone. 7.5 over under. There is some rain in the area. It's cool weather. Not too great for hitters. I love Danny Salazar tonight. I think the strikeouts are coming, so really going to be looking at this Cleveland side, if anything. Francisco Lindor, his hit lefty as well in his career, still pretty cheap, 3,600 there on DraftKings. Mike Napoli, a cheap GPP play. Yan Gomes is a catcher I'm really eyeing. Had a decent series over the weekend. Hitting 5th in the order against a left-hander like Malone, who is home run prone. Malone's been very average against right-handers, allowing a 335 WOBA and a 1.28 home runs per 9 since 2014. I'll be definitely looking at him. He's definitely an interesting play on tonight's slate. Outside of that, Rajai Davis, if he slips up into the order, would be in play. So really, you're looking at those names. Kipnis doesn't necessarily have a bad matchup, but he's only more so if you're there putting together a Cleveland stack. So really like those guys. Next up here, we got the Coors game. 12 over under. Chad Bettis, Jeff Locke. Good luck, my friends. Obviously, you're looking at this game. Now that Bettis is on the hill, Jordy Mercer not going to be leading off. You're going to see John Jaso back up in the leadoff spot, which is disappointing. He was a play you were looking at. David Freese still in play for me. I have 4,200 there on DraftKings, not a bad price. But really, you're looking at 1 through 7 with this Pirates team. A guy that I like here is Gregory Polanco. Bettis, not really a big guy, with the left-handed splits, but still pretty favorable. Lefties, he's a lot of 325 WOBA since 2014. He's more of a reverse splits guy, 365 WOBA to right-handers over the last 2 seasons with a 1.32 home runs per 9. So those bats, Starling Marte really jumps off the map for me. Yes, they are expensive, but they are worth it. So definitely looking at them. And you got a lefty like Jeff Locke on the hill in Coors. Vegas really favors Colorado on this side, 6.4 run total. DJ LeMahieu, Trevor Story. I know Carlos Gonzalez, it's the lefty-lefty matchup, but he is certainly still in play at 4,500. Nolan Arenado, God, I mean, 5K. He's a guy I'll be trying to squeeze into my lineups, even if I'm paying up on the hill. I want them in my lineup because you got to think about this. He's only $800 more than David Freese, and they're just completely on the opposite sides of the spectrum. spectrum there. So really looking at him. Outside of that, not looking at too many other guys lower. You can look at Mark Reynolds if you want to be completely different in this game. But really looking 1 through 5 with those Rockies guys. And we know the drill by now. When they're in cores, you mix them into your lineups. Next game here, we have Cardinals and Diamondbacks, 7.5. Two quality arms on the hill. Jaime Garcia, Zach Greinke. Not really picking on Greinke. I know he struggled at Chase Field, but I think on a 13-game slate, there's better ways to spend your money. As far as the Diamondback side, there are some guys who are lefty mashers. Goldschmidt, still a little bit too pricey for me. Gene Segura, a guy I'm looking at second base and shortstop. Goldschmidt, I keep going back to him, but I think there's just better options at first base tonight. Wellington Castillo, 3,100 there on DK is who I'm really looking at. He is cheap on a bit cheaper on FanDuel, 3,200. So definitely in play for me at Chase Field. I know Garcia is a decent ground ball pitcher, but overall those guys are more than capable of hitting southpaws. So I'm going to be looking at him. Outside of that, I don't expect a ton of runs in that game, even though it is in Chase Field. Next one, you got Royals and Angels. This one, not very favorable for hitters in this one. Not really targeting any Royals bats going up against Garrett Richards. Not really targeting a ton of bats going up against Ian Kennedy. You can look at Trout. He's an interesting play here tonight. Going to be a swerve off those Coors names. Obviously just because Ian Kennedy has had a decent home run per 9 over the last few seasons, 322 WOBA allowed to right-handers. One guy I'm going to keep my eye on and throw out there as far as the GPP play goes is Cole Calhoun. I know Kennedy's looked good so far to start the year, but going back, he's allowed a 1.26 home runs per 9. Calhoun, a cheap guy. I think GPPs, he's worth a look. But outside of that game is pretty awful. Next one here, you got Astros and Mariners, and Mariners big run total tonight, 4.5, going up against Doug Fister. And with Fister on the hill, struggles more so against right-handed bats. He's allowed a 307 WOBA to lefties. Right-handers, though, has been his issue. 320 WOBA, 1.14 homers per 9. The only thing that he has going for him in this one is that he's at Safeco. That does limit some power, but you can look at these bats here from the Mariners, especially in working some one-offs in cash games. You can look at a GPP stack if you wanted to, just because it's a little bit cheaper. Nori Aoki is a guy I'm looking at. Seth Smith, if you want a platoon guy for very cheap. Robinson Cano, Nelson Cruz, Kyle Seager, all guys I'm looking at in this matchup here. Adam Lynn, too, he's cheap. If you're paying up for pitching, you might be able to work some of these guys into your lineup, and they're in a pretty decent spot against Fister. The only thing that comes at a disadvantage is really Safeco, but Vegas is still expecting some runs here, and I am too. Next one, Marlins and Dodgers. Wei-Yin Chen, Ross Stripling on the hill. Not really looking for much out of these two teams. I still think Christian Yelich is in play. Still 4,300 on DraftKings. His price is up there on FanDuel a bit, so you can kind of maybe stay away from him. He's priced around some other guys. He's 3,800. But overall, I think he's a solid play, even in Dodger Stadium there, which is kind of a pitcher's park during the nighttime. I'm not really looking at too many Dodgers bats. Yasiel Puig's one I'm keeping an eye on. Howie Kendrick. Yasmani Grandal's not a bad option. Kike Hernandez is going to slide into the lineups tonight, probably hit leadoff. He's a guy that I like for very cheap. I think he's a solid play. The guy absolutely hammers left-handed pitching. With him being a cheap play, he's going to work himself into plenty of my lineups tonight, just given there's a Coors game in Syndergaard and Bumgarner on the hill, so he's definitely worth a look. Outside of that, it's a pretty heavy left-handed lineup for LA, and Chen being the lefty, I'm looking to more so target Puig, Kendrick, and Kike Hernandez there. So those are guys to really name. Going into the Padres and Giants game, I don't expect a ton of offense from these two teams. Padres obviously not against Bumgarner at home. It's an easy pass for me there. Giants, Pence and Posey, just given they both hammer left-handed pitching, they're worth a look in GPPs. DraftKings prices aren't too bad, and I think if you did want to make a swerve, they're definitely worth a look. Or if you're playing the late slate or something like that, give them a look. Outside of that, you're not looking at too many guys. Brandon Crawford maybe. just because he hit lefties at a decent ISO rate last year. But overall, just because of his price tag, that really puts him in play. So with an over-under of 6.5, you're not really expecting a ton of offense here. You really need to focus on a lot of those early slates, really anything after Coors outside of the Mariners. You're not looking at a ton of production. So that's going to wrap it up here. Check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.